recording, and we will share this recording after the webinar is done so that your colleagues can view it, you can share it, and you can review it whenever you want. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Eduardo and load his presentation. We will do the presentations and then we'll have questions at the end.
Okay, thanks, Coffee, for flagging that. That's good to know how the audio is coming through.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me fine. My name is Eduardo, and I work with the Early Childhood Development section in New York. So I am delighted to be here with all of you. Sorry that Garth cannot join us, and I feel very privileged to go to be among the 4 presenters because they are very high quality people. I see that someone is saying that they cannot hear well. Gary,
colleagues, if you,
Natalie, are people hearing okay? I see a message saying that they can't hear well.
Yeah, it looks like Gary is going to try rebooting. We did a trial yesterday with Gary, so hopefully he'll be able to get it working.
Okay, yes, please, if you can't or you have any problems to hear anything what I said, maybe because of my accent also, because I'm Spanish, so then yes, please write and I will repeat. I want to start that my presentation is going to be a brief presentation to give an overview of the importance of male engagement and also the problems and the obstacles for male engagement that have been pointed out by research lately. And I wanted to start with this slide to confess that I am actually biased. As you can see in this first slide, that's me smiling and enjoying life because I have a little girl. So I am totally biased for male engagement. I think it's essential. Also personally, but not only personally, because as research says, it is essential to look at the family as a system and engage all the members of the family who are parenting. And that is a function that belongs to, in general, more than one person in the household. So let me tell you something about ourselves and why we are talking about this, and it's one of my favorite topics. Maybe it is not something expected that as my first line of talking, but if we want to know why male engagement is important, we have to look at ourselves as primates. We are mammals, and the way we have succeeded in evolution is through working together and through working particularly and growing up and thriving in families. I want to talk to you about this picture on the left side. The little chimpanzee is Oscar. I don't know if you have seen, if you don't, you should, a movie from Walt Disney called Chimpanzee. And it's a very interesting movie in which there was a crew who was in Cote d'Ivoire shooting the last, recording, not shooting, the last chimpanzees in the country. And they came across to a story that was fascinating, and it still fascinates me to this day. So there was this little chimpanzee, Oscar, who lost his mom, when another group of chimpanzees attacked the group. And so he became orphan, and he looked for a mother, and he tried to be adopted for the other females on the group. But all of them had kids. All of them have little chimpanzees, and all of them rejected him. So finally, he was losing weight. He was going to die, and he went to the male, the big boss of the group, of the tribe, who rejected him in the beginning. But at the end, with the empathy that we all have, one day he put it on his back, and he protected and became his primary caregiver. And when this group went back to the rainforest years later, they saw that they did tests, and they saw that there was no genetic linkage between two of them, but the bonding that had been created when Oscar was a baby was still there. So that's the way a little bit it works for all of us. We create attachments, and the way we thrive is, particularly in the first day when we are so vulnerable, is creating positive, nurturing attachments with one or more caregivers. For this theory of the attachment and all the research that we know that we need a positive attachment to thrive and to develop and to reach the maximum of our potential was articulated by John Bowlby in the 50s and 60s. I think it was in the UK. And funny enough, he talked only about the attachment with the mother, with a single caregiver. That was rejected later on and discovered that actually was just bias and cultural bias. And in fact, when Michael Reuter reviewed the theory and John Bowlby accepted the revision of Michael Reuter, he looked at real research and he stated that around 30% of children or babies don't develop that nurturing positive attachment with the mother, but with other members of the family, many times fathers, and also that those attachments are usually not with one, but with more than one person in the family. That's the way we are wired, basically. So the reality is that we want men to parent, to do this function of parenting, and raise healthy, happy children. Men have an impact in the rearing practices and in the growing up of children because they are parts of families and families are a system. So now our objective is going to be that is. Okay, there was a technical problem here. So what we want now is to ensure that men are not going to only have an impact, but they are going to have a positive impact, that they are going to be the best element in the family, mothers also, but all of them are going to be the best they can do to grow up happy, healthy children. So for that, we need in the household, within families, coherent and cohesive messages. We need coherent beliefs, attitudes, and practices in the household. If the mother is a great mother and the father is not practicing good parenting, then it's going to be detrimental for the kids and detrimental and confusing for the kids. Fathers need to learn those skills. They need to be in line with positive beliefs, attitudes, and practices. And that is exactly what we do also with parenting programs with mothers. There are a lot of positive outcomes when we engage through engaging parents, by engaging parents in parenting programs. Psychological health, externalizing and internalizing behavioral problems, control of or diminishing substance abuse, diminishing of criminality and delinquency in the long term, muffling economic disadvantages, capacity for empathy, improving capacity for empathy, improving peer relationships, raising non-traditional attitudes to earning and childcare, satisfaction with adult sexual partnership, self-esteem, and life satisfaction. All this is through research. It's not that I think this is the good outcomes that can come from engaging parents, but it's rather the result of a lot of research that has been conducted. And when we share this presentation, you will see all the references to the research that has basically come out with these results. Just this year, there has been a review of publications done by Yale University and the Fatherhood Institute of London, and they reviewed something like 38,000 documents on parenting programs. They only found, and this is the major highlights of this review, 199 publications with a little bit of evidence on father participation or impact. So that talks volumes about the implicit and explicit biases against men in their role as fathers. And this bias against men as fathers is quite blatant in research, as it is in interventions, programs, parenting programs, and policy. So what this review has basically brought up to light is the need of an overhaul of program design and delivery, for obtaining good data on what is the impact on fathers, and also what is the impact on couple participations, the impact on children, and also on the couples and the family as a system. What I will say is this bias is not only about fathers or against fathers, there is also against other members of the family, which basically talks about not recognition of the reality of what the family as a system is, where sometimes there are grandparents, there are other adults that are exercising this function of parenting. So, and this is against what it is also the research that says that actually engaging parents have very positive outcomes. So we need an unequivocal engagement with co-parents, because the reality is that children are co-parented in both in research and the practice, community-based practice and implementation of different programs. So there is going to be an improvement to the traditional engagement of just one parent in the household. I also wanted to touch a little base on what this year in October, the Lancet series on early childhood development were launched in Washington, basically a few days ago. And there we also talked about, or the series also looked at all the research and the evidence existing on ACEV, and they mentioned several times male engagement. Basically, the Lancet is very much in line with the review of Yale University and the Fatherhood Institute of London, and they come up with the same results in a way. So they say that the most powerful context for nurturing care, which is a concept that is used in the Lancet beautifully, is the home, and in the home there are mothers, fathers, and other caregivers. They also talked about the need of benefiting mothers and children through enabling environments with shared caregiving. So again, looking at male engagement. But interestingly enough, also one of the points of the Lancet is this gaps that the review of the Yale University and the Fatherhood Institute pointed at. There is gaps in research regarding the father's role and the impact of those fathers providing care and protection for the youngest kids. One point that I found very interesting in the Lancet is scalability. There is one mention in one of the articles on the Lancet that look at the scalability of parenting programs engaging parents, and one of the of ACEV, and one of the elements that the researcher pointed at is that when we provide parental leave for fathers, and I know that many of you who have looked at the research will think, oh yes, but many times fathers don't take that parental leave even when they have access to it. Well, that can be true, but the reality is when the fathers have access to parental leave, that has enormous benefits for the family as a whole, for the father in particular, but also for the young child, and increase, because it increases also the engagement of the father in his responsibilities as a father, in responsiveness, in care, in protection, etc., etc. And just to finish, this is my last slide. I wanted just to mention a few ways of engaging fathers. Just few pieces of research there on different programs. And this is more just to open the floor for the next presenters, who I am very excited to listen to, because they are going to look more into specific programs on engaging fathers. And this is just a few examples of them. There are many more. Unfortunately, well, I said many more, but not as many as we would like to have. You have, for example, the Fathers Class in Haiti, which has been highly researched and which looks at community-based structures and ways of engaging fathers, for example, in rural Vietnam through worship places and small local libraries. You will see there also the group-based programs targeting fathers in low-income immigrants by Kochak, I think it's called. Then we are going to listen right after this presentation the great program of Father Support Program, I think it's called, which is with ACEV in Turkey. And you have also the last one I mentioned there is the Better Parenting Program, which is in Jordan, and it's a group-based, in addition to mothers, how they engage group-based other fathers. And even if the sample was small, it was pretty interesting. And many of these have a lot of open the door for further research and give interesting results on the positive outcomes of engaging fathers. Thank you very much all, and I'm looking forward to hear to the next speaker.
Great, thank you, Eduardo. I think that you brought up some really interesting things, especially for our colleagues who are working in policy, who are on the webinar, but also people working in education and across all the sectors. So now we're going to bring up Yasemin's presentation. Just one second. We'll share these presentations after the webinar is done. So, and also if you have questions along the way, feel free to type them into the conversation box and we'll keep track of them and we'll get to those at the end. So Yasemin, let me make sure
yes.
Okay, great.
You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Natalie, for organizing this valuable webinar along with Eduardo, and thank you, Eduardo, for your wonderful presentation. Warm welcome to all the participants, and I look forward to listening to my next presenters as well. Today I will present to you the Father Support Program of ACEV, which is the abbreviation for the Mother-Child Education Foundation. I actually am Director of ACEV Social Investments, which is a network of institutions, all education related, based in Turkey. There are 4 institutions, one of which is ACEV. They've all been founded by the same philanthropic family called the Özyeğins. And just to go tell you a little bit about ACEV, it's a private NGO, private foundation, based in Istanbul, Turkey. It was founded in 1993, and it predominantly focuses on developing and implementing early childhood and adult education programs. And when I say adult education, I mean both parenting for mothers and fathers and for illiterate women in Turkey as well. We're also very active in raising awareness about these issues, as well as advocating for better policies around families and development of children, everything from quality public preschooling to demanding better parental leave policies to childcare subsidies. The flagship program of ACEV really is the Mother-Child Education Program, which gave its name to the foundation. It was a program that was developed at a university in Turkey as kind of an alternative to center-based preschools in Turkey, because back then the public service provision was very low, and the private ones were just not affordable for low and middle income classes. So ACEV was really founded to expand this program, which we abbreviate as MOCEP, a 25-week long course for mothers of 5 to 6-year-old preschool-age children. And really along the years, MOCEP was the one that inspired the development of other early childhood and parenting programs by ACEV, including the one on fathers that I'll describe in detail. But throughout these 23 years, we've been able to reach nearly 1 million individuals, beneficiaries, mothers, fathers, children, and illiterate women in Turkey. And we've been able to train nearly 12,000 trainers to deliver these programs to end beneficiaries. I'm seeing that the presentation is no longer there. Can you all see it?
Yeah, I'm seeing that too. Let me reload it.
Okay. Thank you. And it should be fine now. The programs that we've developed, they've also been requested by NGOs and universities in countries outside of Turkey. 15 in total so far have adopted the programs, translated and implemented. And in the process, these programs have been translated to several languages, anything from Arabic to English, Portuguese, Lao, German. And Jordan actually was the Better Parenting Initiative that Eduardo was referring to was one of the countries that adopted the mother-child education program to make it a part of the Better Parenting Initiative. The father support program, as I mentioned, was a follow-up really to the mother-child education program. We knew back then, back in the 90s, and it was apparent that, in the family unit, fathers have a very critical role in the development of their children, and women's standing in society as well. But what really pushed us to develop this father support program in 1996 was really in response to the mothers who participated in ACEV's programs, demanding that fathers should also be offered similar training because they were complaining that the fathers weren't supportive enough at home. They'd say, okay, you teach us all these wonderful skills on how to effectively communicate with our children, to not use corporal punishment, etc. And I do it. I implement everything that you teach us. But then the father comes home, slaps the child, and it all goes to waste. So they said you really ought to be training the fathers. And that's when we actually accelerated the development of this father program. Which actually ended up covering very similar topics to the ones for mothers, everything from child development to parenting styles, etc. But we ended up having more targeted sessions on communication, empathy, and included gender as well in our father program. This program, we've reached nearly 70,000 fathers and children through it, through face-to-face implementations. And it's really held in 2 modules, one for fathers of 3 to 6-year-olds and one for fathers of 7 to 11-year-olds. And the way we conduct this program is we hold weekly 2 to 3 hour long sessions with groups of 15 to 20 fathers, often in public school classrooms where mostly these fathers' children actually attend. And we hold them in the evenings because almost all fathers are working. And the group leader that we have here is often a school counselor or a certified teacher in that school who has gone through the intensive trainer seminar that ACEV gives to these group leaders. It's a 2-week-long seminar, and then we continue to supervise these group leaders to monitor quality and to support them throughout the process. We really try to refrain from didactic methods of teaching, and we encourage a lot of dialogue and sharing in these father sessions. So it's really like a support program for these fathers as well. Here on this slide on page 5, you can see on the left the topics of each weekly session. So we have 13 weeks with the fathers, and on the 14th and 15th weeks, we invite the mothers to come and learn about the program as well. And on the right, you can see the picture of the cover of the manual that the trainers use. This is a trainer's manual that ACEV has developed. It's pretty long. It's actually 250 pages. It's very detailed, but also very easy for the trainer to follow and conduct week by week during the session. It includes a lot of information, reading chapters, games, case studies, and various other tools that the trainer can use to deliver the content effectively. And as you can see here with the session content, there are really a variety of areas that we cover, from developmental needs of the child to different styles of parenting, to the assumed roles of fathers in society and the family, all the way to sexual and reproductive health. What we don't see here, actually, are all these quite culturally, socially, and personally maybe sensitive topics that we have managed to immerse throughout the content. The program that was developed back in mid-90s, it was actually revised back in 2010, and we included all these themes of gender equality, prevention of gender-based violence, respect for differences, peace, and difficult topics like child abuse and child neglect throughout our content. And we talk about these through different cases, through different examples with the fathers. Parenting is really the hook here, and we're able to address really more sensitive topics through this program as well. And we've had actually 3 scientific studies, research conducted on the impact of this father support program. The first one that you see here by Kochak in 2004 was also mentioned in Eduardo's presentation. And we've had 2 recent ones done as well after the revision of the program. And what we really found is that this program has been successful in increasing awareness in fathers about fatherhood, about the importance about their importance in their children's development. We've seen that the fathers have really decreased the use of their authoritarian or permissive child-rearing practices. We've seen that fathers are really able to learn and apply some of these democratic communication methods that we teach them and that we help them practice through topics on child development and parenting. And lastly, there's been an increase in the awareness around domestic violence, about gender equality as well. All of this research is accessible on ACEV's website, but what I want to actually show you more in detail are a bunch of quotes by the program beneficiaries. So this one on page 8 is fathers who participate in the father support program talking about the changes they're seeing in their own behavior. So the black highlights that you see here are pre-program attitudes and approaches, and the orange ones are post-program changes in summary. I mean, feel free to read them. There's a lot of allusion to the use of learned corporal punishment before the program, or the apathy that they learned from the generation before, and the realization by the fathers that they themselves have been mimicking what they had seen from their fathers. So there's a lot of this transgenerational aspect of parenting behaviors is very apparent in these quotes. The next slide, page 9, is fathers reporting on what they're observing to be the changes in their children's behavior after they have participated in this program. Here we see how fathers realize how important it is that they take the time to effectively communicate with their children, to be present for them. They realize that their behaviors have a direct impact on their children. And this level of awareness is very important to begin with. On the next slide, on page 10, I included some quotes from fathers talking about the changes they're observing in their behavior towards their wives. Similar to their relationship with their children, we see that these men are just spending more quality time with their wives, they're sharing more, and they're communicating more with their spouses. And finally, the wives reporting, wives of fathers who participated in the program. The second quote is one of my favorites. again, women are just talking about how their husbands' attitudes change towards how they share child rearing and household responsibilities, and how there is much more enhanced communication among the family members. Finally, I want to talk just very briefly about the advocacy campaigns that we've been running. What I've told you so far was the programmatic side. But we really put fatherhood and gender equality through leveraging men as a focus of our advocacy efforts over the past couple of years, where we also had a chance to collaborate and interact with MenCare and Men Engage campaigns as well. I know my colleague Gary will be talking about that a little bit further, about their campaigns. And we've really been doing very heavy campaigning over the past 3 years throughout Turkey, using a lot of visuals in public spaces, through media coverage, TV, web, radio, through face-to-face conferences, panels. We were able to design and hold these short awareness-raising seminars on gender equality and responsible fatherhood for the personnel of the Ministry of Family and Social Policies, which is the ministry that is second active after the Ministry of Education in designing all these child development and parenting policies and family policies in Turkey. And we'll be continuing our advocacy efforts further. We'll be still emphasizing the importance of increasing male involvement in early childhood through continuing the awareness-raising campaigns. We'll be establishing a larger platform by working with business organizations. We'll also be looking into fatherhood practices in Turkey in more detail. We'll hold a national research for that, so it can further inform our programmatic and other efforts throughout Turkey. And finally, we'll be looking into how we can enhance the sustainability of the father groups. And what I mean by that is what we've observed with the fathers is that even after the program ends, the 15-week-long program, fathers, but this is not true for all groups, I would say maybe 10%, 20% of the groups continue to sporadically meet. They play, soccer together. They sometimes will take their families and go picnic together. But we want to increase that engagement for the groups that don't do it. So we're going to be doing some follow-up modules and testing that in the future as well. So that concludes my presentation. I'll look forward to your questions, and I'll hand it back to Natalie now.
Thank you so much, Yasemin. I think you brought up some interesting issues about the cultural, historical tradition that you're sort of up against, and then also paired with what Eduardo was talking about in terms of bias, and there have been some questions in the conversation bar about that. And I also think it was really interesting to talk about parenting problems including spouses. So whenever you're having a male involvement program, you also have to think about involving the mom in that program. So maybe there will be some discussion about that later. Next up, we have Gary. I'm going to load your presentation, Gary, and then you'll be able to take over as presenter.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. And
Okay.
just press that button at the top to take over so you have control.
Perfect.
Yep, there you go.
All right. Thanks all for the invitation. I missed some of the beginning, trying to get the audio going, but was able to pick up along the way. So I'll share some reflections of where the MenCare campaign comes from. And as mentioned before, ACEV has been a partner, and we've certainly been inspired by a lot of their work. We started the MenCare campaign in 2011, stemming from Promundo's work of nearly 20 years around engaging men and boys for gender equality. And we certainly knew that one of the issues where there was huge inequality was the issue of engaging men in the care of children as well as other unpaid care work. So our work has emerged really around from a child development and children's rights perspective, but also within this framework of gender equality and understanding how social norms and workplace realities and work lives of men and women certainly prevent or make it difficult in much of the world for men to be involved in the daily care of their children. Just to give a sense of the policies, and I know that I believe Eduardo was talking a bit about parental leave policies. This is a review, certainly as we look at kind of the single set of policies that have been used, at least in middle-income countries, to promote men's involvement in the care of children. Speaking of parental leave, this is a review that World Bank carried out, looking at countries that offer maternity leave, those that offer some paternity leave, and those that offer parental leave that is included for both men and women. And really what we want is that countries offer all three of these. That is, some time after birth for women, some time that both parents can do, and some time that would be available for fathers to try to nudge them along to doing half the care work or some portion of the care work at least. And there's only, as you can see that dark blue in the middle, there's only 31 countries in the world that offer leave policies that really say we think fathers or other biological or otherwise should be equal caregivers. So just to give you a sense of where we are in terms of the challenges of having a policy framework out there of at least one of the most effective policies, at least in countries where large portions of the workplace are in the formal sector. So what do we see in terms of inequality around the world? Not surprisingly, and historically, women and girls have done the majority of the care work. Here's data showing kind of average use from 46 countries for which we had data available. And you can see that 40% of men who have children report they spend on average no time with their children. And you can see that as hours go up, it's predominantly women. Globally, looking at the data, women spend 3 times the amount of time caring for children than men do. So we know that whatever we do, and particularly thinking about scale, we've got to think about social norms, we've got to think about policies that take into account the work lives of men and women, that incentivize care work and support it for both parents, but certainly try to do big affirmative action to try to get men to do it. So that's the framework that we launched the MenCare campaign in 2011 with some UN partners. It's also been, Save the Children has been a partner. Promundo coordinates it together with a South African NGO called Sonke Gender Justice. And there's now 40 active country networks, mostly NGOs. Sometimes these have also included government partners. But again, the focus on civil society organizations that are trying to build the evidence base, carry out joint campaigning, do global advocacy with the UN around policies that are needed, as well as exchange lessons around program work at the community level. And as mentioned before, ACEV has been one of those. Our big policy platform that we launched in 2015 was a first ever State of the World's Fathers, and it reviewed some of the literature that Eduardo just mentioned in his presentation as well, some of it from the child development field, affirming the importance of multiple caregivers in the lives of children. We provided a strong policy platform there around the need for combined policies that offer adequate and accessible and subsidized child care, together with evidence-based parent training, together with adequate parental leave, and other kinds of income support programs that might nudge men toward doing more of the work. And we affirmed what the data tells us globally about what the benefits that involving men as nonviolent caregivers brings for children, for women, for men themselves. Eduardo highlighted some of those. We highlight some of the emerging biological information as well, finding that when men are in close contact with their children, there are biological changes in their bodies that kind of help us get beyond the myth that caregiving is only something that women are biologically attuned to, that actually men can be quite attuned to this as well. We affirm the need to start early, and here's where UNICEF is a key partner of thinking about the kinds of gender socialization we offer from early on. And we affirm the need not just to talk about biological families in the context of heterosexual couples, but really to think about the diversity of all kinds of caregiving, both of children, but also looking at how we think about men's caregiving of elderly parents, care of spouses, care as a profession, in addition to the care of biological children. Then we've been carrying out some original research as well. Some of that is part of a multi-country study called the International Men and Gender Equality Survey, to try to go deeper into what are some of the factors that seem to encourage or drive men's caregiving, as well as other behaviors, practices, and norms. But we've got an emerging amount of data on what is it that drives or makes it either hinders or makes it possible to include men in caregiving. This is data from a number of the countries that shows the association between if men saw their own fathers do care work. There's a very strong association across cultures, where there's a lot of encouragement of men to do care work. That would be some of the middle-income countries cited here, as well as countries where there's very little encouragement for men to do care work. Also some of the countries, particularly South Asia, but some other places as well, where there's not as much cultural support for men's participation. But regardless, there's the issue of if men see their fathers do it, they are far more likely to carry it out. So what we find is the importance of planting the seeds early on for children to see men doing caregiving as much as they see women to do it. The research also finds some other factors. Certainly caring for younger siblings as a child is a key one. And that's something for us to think about in the education sector and also in early child development sectors, to say, how do we get children involved early on, not just girls, which is far more common, but to get boys involved in caring for siblings and other family members. As I said before, having a father who did the care work, exposure to violence has an opposite effect. That is, if you were exposed to violence as a child, you're less likely to participate as a father in the daily care of your children later on. Work lives matter. Whether you work fewer hours or took paternity leave, even when that paternity leave is a few days. Obviously, causality is going in multiple directions here. Men who take paternity leave were probably already more predisposed to carry out child care, but we certainly know that policy matters a huge amount. And it certainly matters if your partner works outside the home. So we see a number of factors that give us some ideas on what we can do to push. We've also been doing some qualitative research, listening to men in cultures where it's not as common for men to do an equal amount of the caregiving, and what we found quite clearly is the challenge of taking on cultural norms. And a lot of men sense that they lose their manhood by doing caregiving as a full-time or being co-primary caregivers. And so the importance of us reinforcing men who are already doing this, including in settings where it's not very common for men to do it. I think that study affirmed the importance of, some men came to say, I should do more of the caregiving because it's the gender equitable thing to do. But most of that came to it because life made them do it. Their spouse was working more than they were. They had migrated for her work, or they had migrated for other reasons, or there was an illness of their spouse and he ended up having to do the primary caregiving. So it does tell us the importance of how can we create factors that nudge men toward doing it. That sometimes attitude change drives the practice change or behavior change, but sometimes we've got to figure out ways that we nudge men toward doing it, and we worry about the changes in the attitudes later on. We've also been looking at what sectors, particularly in some of the poorer countries in the global south and some middle-income countries, seem to give a chance for scale-up of approaches to engaging men. And particularly looking at that challenge of, one lever, of course, is parental and paternity leave. But we know that if we don't change norms and the daily practices of getting men to do more of this and having women support men's participation in care work, that such policies will have limited effectiveness. So we've been experimenting in some of the MenCare partner countries with looking at the health sector as a point of entry. And one of the reasons is data show us, and we cite this in the State of the World's Fathers, and our images data supports this as well, that a large portion of men, even if they're not doing much caregiving, go to at least one prenatal visit. Now the photo here shows a man, actually being in the consultation room. What we find in many countries is that men are in the waiting room. They may even be in the parking lot, not even invited in, or don't feel comfortable even going into the waiting room. There's not a lot of effort in most health sectors in the global south to engage men all the way into the moment of the consultation. So we've been working in Brazil for about 7 years, helped create and provide the technical norms for what is now called the men's health sector. There's now a protocol for a men's prenatal health visit of how to invite him in, but it's her invitation. That is, the mother gets to decide if she wants him there. There's screening for violence. And if the couple is not together, he can be invited to come back at another moment. In some cities, he's being invited into group education processes based on a manual we created called Program P that includes some elements from ACEV and has many others that we've tested in a few settings. We're also doing this in Rwanda, where we've developed a 16-week parent training module that's got child rearing activities, activities on sexual and reproductive health, gender-based violence, what to expect when you're expecting for fathers, and I'll share one slide just about the results of those, so we've got some time for conversation. We've just finished up a first wave of data collection in a randomized controlled trial in Rwanda. Using this approach, fathers come to a 16-week training process with trained facilitators, activities, as I said before, about couple communication, expectations around the birth that's on its way, child rearing practices, reductions in, looking at alternatives to violence both against children and by men's use of violence against a female partner, discussions about children's rights in the context of Rwanda. The men are recruited via the health sector, and we've had extremely high adhesion, that is participation by men in the process. The first round, that is 9 months after the fathers participated in the group education activities and mothers participate in the last 3 activities, the first round of data collection shows a decrease in violence by men against women by more than half, a similar decrease in men's use of violence against children, increased participation by men in multiple forms of caregiving, and increased support by men for their partner's reproductive health decisions. We're writing the data up and should have a journal article published in the first quarter of next year, and then we'll have a second wave of data collection that comes out a year later to look at the effects and hope to have a couple of indicators on child development as well. That is not just parent reports, but also to gather some data about child development outcomes. I should also emphasize that these reports about decreased violence against women are reports by women themselves, reporting that his use of violence against her declined, compared to no change in the control group. In Brazil, we haven't been as successful as getting men to come to the group education sessions. It's typically been up to 4 sessions they will come to, but it has been very successful to get them to come back for follow-up testing and treatment for their own health issues, as well as health issues that matter a huge amount for women and children. This program is now rolled out in about half the municipalities in Brazil through the public health system, and of men who are coming, and in some municipalities it's been up to 80% of men coming to one of the structured prenatal visits, kind of made friendly to men. And of those men, 14% are coming for follow-up health care for themselves. And this, sorry, I just had this slide in Portuguese, but it shows the kind of testing that men are doing when they come back for taking care of their own health. So they're doing general blood work, and the red shows that the vast majority of those are coming for HIV testing. So it's been probably the most successful HIV testing approach to get men, expectant fathers, to come for HIV testing than any other approach in terms of reaching at least heterosexual men in the context of Brazil. So we're quite encouraged that while getting men to come for father training via the health sector in Brazil has been a challenge, at the very least in terms of one key health outcome, it has been a successful program. I'm going to stop there. We're spending a lot of time gathering this data, doing impact evaluation, as I mentioned in the case of Rwanda. We'll be sharing those results, and we're doing some training with some other countries around the approach. The manual that we're training from is called Program P, for in Spanish and Portuguese, paternidad, paternity, etc. And we're trying to pull it together with this combination of policies with the health sector, also the early childhood sector, and thinking with countries about the kinds of leave policies and other income support programs that might work in lower income countries where paid paternity leave might not be appropriate. So that's where we are, and thrilled to entertain some questions about this.
Thank you so much, Gary. That was really interesting. And a really great segue to our next presentation that's going to be specifically about an HIV-related program. So really nice to see the results and getting men to take care of their own health with it, which actually also benefits the family. So the next presentation, and you know, it's already almost 10 o'clock, which is when we're going to end, but we have one more presentation, and then those who have questions can stick around hopefully for a couple of minutes for the to get their questions answered. Gary, one question quickly was, are these materials you talked about available online? And if so, can you share the link in the conversation?
I see that Eduardo just shared the link to the MenCare website. So there's films, there's the manuals, There's background documents, and the State of the World's Fathers report are all there.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you. Now, Kelvin, are you there? I see he's on pause. Okay. Kelvin, can you hear me? Well, perhaps while Kelvin's coming on, we can take a few questions. I know Eduardo has been fielding quite a few. But you know what? There was one question. Is there any difference between HIV positive fathers and HIV negative fathers? I don't know who would like to take that. Maybe Eduardo.
Hi. If there is HIV positive fathers or negative, well, I wouldn't be that dichotomic in terms of talking about the positive and negative of fatherhood or motherhood. I think one of the interesting things what I see is that the first point that assume when we approach parenting is that fathers and mothers, parents like their kids and they love their kids and they try to do the best for their kids. And I think that's the way we start approaching any kind of parenting program or engagement with parents. Though I think not many of them need help to understand which is the best way to do so. I think there is Kevin is there, so I'm going to let Kevin to take over and make a presentation, and then we can come back to this later. Thanks.
Perfect. Yes, Kelvin, we can hear you now. Thanks, Eduardo. Hi, Kelvin.
Hello.
Yes, can you hear us?
Mute yourself.
Okay, so we heard Kelvin, but now it sounds like we can't hear him anymore. Well, maybe we should take one more question then, and when Kelvin comes back, we'll get to his presentation. So, you know, there were a lot of there's a lot of discussion about biases and what we assume in terms of male involvement and in different cultural contexts. I don't know if maybe Yasemin has some thoughts on that, or Gary or Eduardo, and maybe how to overcome those biases, or if there's any science to it.
Yeah, I think it was Agnes that brought that up, and I agree with you that Agnes, that we need better male role models, you know, to motivate fathers to take more active roles in their children's development. Turkey is predominantly, I would say, a patriarchal society, at least on the outside. At home, I would say the women really have a lot more say than what it looks like to the outside. But the way, I guess I could tell you what we've done with the Father Support Program. You know, we've reached probably around 400 or 300,000 mothers versus 70,000 fathers. So there you go. I mean, we haven't been able to open that many father programs, but still 70,000, I think, is a lot, really a lot for a place like Turkey or anywhere else. The way we reach fathers is we send letters to the fathers from the school, the public school that their children attend. Okay, so the principal will send a letter home to the father saying, ACEV's father support program will be implemented in that school, and would you like to come to an info session? So we have, let's say, 200 fathers who come to the info session, and then we have 100 sign up, and then we have 50 who really come to the groups. So we have 2 groups in that school. I think the hook that we use about them being a better for their father for their children and for their children's development is really what motivates the fathers in our case. You know, every parent wants their children to be happy, healthy, etc. But I think there's also in a, you know, middle-income country like Turkey, or I would say this might be even more prominent for lower-income countries, the parents kind of, you know, invest in their children's future. They see, I know this is not very politically correct to say, but it's the truth, that children are kind of their investments, their insurances in the future when they get old. So both for, you know, altruistic and non-altruistic reasons, I think the motivation behind us being able to get these fathers in the room is their desire to really become better fathers for their children. And I think that can be really, you know, that's across the board globally in any culture. I would say that is the primary instinct.
Great.
This is Gary. I would echo that. I think, you know, the challenge, we don't find it necessarily as challenging to get men to come to some of the father training. I think the challenging part is how do we change the structure of our workplaces? How do we have policies that support caregiving in general as a profession, that make caregiving, you know, as valued as the other things that we do in our lives? You know, I think if we look at the countries that have made men's care of children as normal as women's care of children, and that would probably be a few Scandinavian countries and maybe Canada, maybe some parts of the U.S., where it's been, you know, kind of as common for men to do as much of the caregiving or almost as much of the caregiving as women. It is that combination of making this normal, that heads of corporations support parental leave and paternity leave, not just maternity leave, that policies, you know, it took Scandinavian countries some 20 years of experimenting with such policies to get men to begin to do kind of a reasonable take-up of it, and then to actually use the time in close to equal amounts of mothers in terms of leave, but also seeing that turn into the daily care of children. So I think what we've been looking at is how do we get those spaces, whether they're early childhood, whether it's primary education, whether it's the health sector, and the big challenge is certainly the workplace, to say we expect this of men just as we support women in doing it. And I think sometimes what we see and get criticized by some women's organization partners who say, well, you know, fathers come and do a tiny amount and they get all kinds of big praise. We're doing the lion's share of it. And this is just considered normal. So, you know, I think we have to be very careful of thinking about how do we promote equality in it, while at the same time we keep our focus on early childhood development, children's rights, and really creating these safer spaces and safe home and public environments for children. But I think that combination of changing institutional norms together with the kind of high-quality parent training and doing evaluation of that, as ACEV has and Promundo has and others have, I think really, to me, is the key.
Great. Thank you, Gary, for that sort of bird's eye view perspective. And, you know, it's a real shame that we're not hearing Kelvin's presentation, and I'm not sure what the issue is, but he's been sliding through the slides at least, and we can share those with the group. And one thing that you'll see is the beautiful photos that were taken of this project that is cross-sectoral, so looking at involving men in the prevention of mother-to-child transmission through male champion models who are trained and go around the community and meet with families and encourage their participation in the health of the mother and the child. And I was wondering if Eduardo would like to comment on that, sort of where parenting programs actually can start before birth. Eduardo, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, ideally, parenting programs should start, in fact, before birth, they should start, in fact, before conception. I think one of the, in terms of linking that with male engagement, is particularly important because of all the obstacles and stereotypes and that have been mentioned by Yasemin and by Gary. As Gary said, there is a big problem on the work environment, but it is beyond that. It's also on the household, and I'm sure that you have witnessed many times this dismissive and belittling way of talking to men in their parental role, saying like, oh, men, of course they don't know how to change nappies, men, as a very dismissive and marginalizing way of referring to men in their parenting role. So what the research has looked into is male engagement has been many times the result of thematic approaches to resolve very specific problems, like, for example, HIV transmission. And I think that's great, and there have been very good and positive results on that. And I'm really sorry that we are not hearing the presentation of Kevin, because I think that also there's a lot of lessons learned from the engagement of men to address specific problems that are related to parenting, like, for example, HIV and transmission. But there is less experience and less programs of more holistic male engagement in parenting, looking at multidimensional or multisectoral parenting programs. So men and men's role in parenting is also linked not only to a specific topic like health or wash or hygiene, for example, but it's also looking at all the 5 dimensions of parenting. It's looking at caring for the child, is looking at supporting and protecting the child, is looking at the responsive of the child, the stimulation, and looking also at health and nutrition issues linked to parenting. And obviously all those is a very complex, and being a father or being a mother being a parent is one of the most difficult tasks that we will probably encounter in our lives if we have the chance and the joy to do so. So that is not going to be addressed with just a couple of sessions here or there. And that is also the result of the experience, for example, of ACEV, when they talk about the sessions and a very holistic program with parents, but also then they look at the engagement with the private sector, they look at platforms and advocacy, more on social and community-based engagement. The Parents Group, I think, is an amazing initiative also that has been replicated in many other countries.
Great, thank you. Actually, Eduardo, as you were speaking, there was a question that came up about integrating these approaches and including men in all sorts of programming, and you kind of started to answer that, and Gary has a great answer to that in the conversation bar. One question that we didn't get to, and then I think we should wrap up, was if anybody has examples of how they engage with communication for development in their programming. Was there any specific engagement with that, maybe in the outreach to fathers or the advocacy efforts? Does anybody have anything to talk about there? And if not, maybe Eduardo, you want to have the final word?
Well, we are working a lot with communication for development and looking at how we can use different platforms to convey messages of parenting and male engagement. And male engagement is actually one of the major things that we have put as a priority to work with communication for development here. But I think ACEV also did a great, even in the pictures there in the presentation for Yasemin, it was great how they look at positive images of fatherhood and how parents engage with their kids, and the youngest one and doing what Harvard University called the self and return with the little kids, right? The engagement and the communication with kids since they are born, and even before, even when during pregnancy you have to communicate and talk to to the kid before they are pregnant. Pablo also mentioned in the conversation column there that we are working with trying to capture some of the images of positive fatherhood, particularly in Africa, because there are all these stereotypes that fathers or men don't care about the kids when they are very young, and that is not completely true. I mean, there are a lot of men that obviously love their kids and engage with them from the moment or before they are born, but definitely from the moment they are born. So we want to also capture a lot of those images and use them to change those stereotypes. That stereotypes are just stereotypes, and we should really get rid of them. So hopefully, Communication for Development is going to help us, or is helping already on changing those negative views, which are totally absurd, and they don't benefit anyone. They don't benefit men, they don't benefit the children, and they don't benefit the mothers and the other members of the family. Families are systems, and they need to reinforce their communication, their peaceful and communication, and definitely one of the best ways to do that is through parenting and through engaging through the kids and having these coherent messages in the household. I talked about that, but also Yasemin talked about these coherent messages and coherent behaviors, practices, and beliefs within the household. And I think that's more or less what I wanted to say today. I'm super happy. The presentations were fantastic. Thank you so much, Kerry and Yasemin. I think this is just one step more in our big an ambitious agenda of changing the world and changing the world from the beginning of life, with this having good parenting practices and with kids, and creating happier, healthier, and more peaceful societies. And the best way to do that is through early childhood development and starting from the beginning, engaging all the members of the family. Thank you, everyone, and thank you very much, Natalie, for organizing, and all the presenters.
Yes, thank you to all the presenters and for everybody who participated and engaged so nicely in the conversation. We'll share this. I wrote down people's names, and I'll share the recording as well as the presentations. If you're not a UNICEF person, please send your email in the conversation window so that I make sure that I have it. And thank you very much, and we'll keep you posted for the next webinar series that should happen in December. Bye.